Welcome to the Wisconsin Music Podcast.
Welcome to the Wisconsin Music Podcast. This week we have Jordan Hoversholm. Did I say that correctly?
You did.
Awesome. All right, and he is part of Hayley Wood Recording Studios. So, Jordan, welcome to the Wisconsin Music Podcast.
Hey, thanks, man. I appreciate you having me.
So let's give the listeners a little bit about yourselves. How did you get into music, and then kind of how did you get into the other side of the glass, so to say, in the recording studio?
All right, for sure. Well, I was always kind of interested in music, and I played like trumpet in middle school and high school, and then that transitioned to guitar lessons, and then I kind of was drawn more to rap and hip hop and car stereos, and that kind of started my electronics wormhole. So fast forward a little bit out of high school, I had a buddy who was going to MMI, and I didn't really know what an engineer is. Like, a lot of people, apologies mom and dad if you listen, but a lot of people just think like, oh, you're a DJ. Like, yeah, I'm a DJ. He kind of just opened my eyes to, like, the first time seeing Pro Tools and seeing recorded audio. I was kind of, my nerd senses were tingly. So
Gotcha.
That kind of opened that up, and I ended up going to MMI with a buddy of mine, and then I moved back up to Eau Claire and just started working with rap artists or singer-songwriters, pretty much, anything I could accommodate in a bedroom studio. And then I reached out to, the couple studios around and would go out there for, if I had to do like drums and then come back and do overdubs. And, the dream was always to have my own place. And so last summer, I, kind of committed to building this place, got a shed in the backyard. And since then I've been Tim the Tool Man out here, going to YouTube University, trying to figure out how to soundproof and drywall and wire everything up.
Gotcha. Yeah. You and I are not kind of in the same boat. I've been doing audio engineering since the early 2000s. I went to the recording workshop out in Chillicothe, summer of 01 or 02. It's a blur by now, but I'm a high school band director by trade, and I also run the recording arts club at the high school. So we have a lot to talk about today.
Cool.
So for our listeners out there, though, they don't really care about me, but more about you. So where are you basically located, and what do you feel is like your niche?
All right. Well, I'm a little north of Eau Claire. I was gonna say, man, you nailed the last name better than any substitute teacher I've ever had in my life. But the Halliewood, I named it that because Lake Hallie is it's like 10 minutes north of Eau Claire. So I'm actually not in the Madison area, but it's totally cool, man. I probably put in my bio thing that I went to Madison Media Institute. So I'm like 10 minutes north of Eau Claire, and it's pretty accessible as far as like Highway 53 and 29 are like, I could almost throw a rock to the intersection of that. So, I have some people from the cities, from Wausau, pretty easy to get here. But then niche wise, I'm kind of trying to spread my wings a little bit by opening this studio. I will say, although I was limited in my first, I graduated in, same here. I can't remember if it was 2011 or 12, but in or around.
Yeah, right.
So, mostly doing vocals, which, after a certain time is like, I want to do more, but I realized that was maybe a blessing in disguise, if you will, because vocals, as can be one of the hardest instruments to mix because everybody knows what a voice sounds like. Like if you're doing like synths and sampled drums, it's like, well, the weirder the better for synths, but instruments like piano or guitar, or especially the human voice, like we, our hearing is tuned when we're born to, hear our mother's voice and
Right.
recognize that. So it's hard to fake that. So I just, when I started to do things more than rap and hip hop, I just always fell back on, like, if the vocal production is right, then, the vocalist is in the center of the stage for a reason, and the center of the mix. So as long as that's believable, I mean, I'm not saying that the drums could be, an afterthought, but that was kind of what I hung my hat on. And I mean, now I'd like to think I'm, more well-rounded than I was when I first started, but I really try to hang my hat on vocal production.
Gotcha. So, yeah, I mean, if you think about it, majority of the people, they want to go, when they go to see a band or whatever, they want to sing along. So if there's a very bad vocal production, it's a major turnoff for some people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it'll make you hit skip real quick too.
Yeah, exactly. Being that, as vocals are being your main thing, but you're also kind of branching out. You said you're in your backyard.
Yeah.
Okay, so how big? You called it a shed, but how big is your shed?
Well, yeah, my buddies kind of clown me for that. They're like, "You got to stop calling it a shed, man." But I got one of those kind of pre-made sheds, like they're, alongside of the highway. There's a couple of different companies, and I was lucky enough. There was like 3 different places kind of had show lots around here, so I could kind of walk through, look at the roofs of the ones that had been around, like, well, this one's a little slanted and the door doesn't close. I think I'll check the next guy's out. So the plan was I was going to lay a slab and, build a structure, but we have a side lot, and I got into it a little bit with the village.
Okay.
They're like, if you want to build a slab, you got to combine your lots. We're on a corner, so property taxes that go through the roof, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, so what if I got a portable shed? They're like, well, there's not much we can do. It's like,
right.
Okay, thank you for your time. Goodbye. So ordered that, and that came as a shell. And then it's 16 by 32. So the control room is about 17 feet. And then I guess I shouldn't be pointing for our audio audience here. And then the control room's probably like almost 2/3 of it.
Okay.
And then I kind of sectioned out like a little booth, and then the rest is depending on semantics, the live room or drum booth.
Right.
But I tried to, yeah, has been a lifelong dream, and I know that, like, if I move in the next house I go to, it might be like, well, this room is the studio. So since I had the chance to build it the dimensions I want, I kind of, went through the wormhole of the Sepmeyer golden ratios, tried to make sure I wasn't setting myself up for modes and nodes that were going to build up. Like, with an 8-foot ceiling, you don't want your room to be 12 feet wide and 16 feet long, or there's not enough treatment in the world to save your butt.
Yeah.
So, I tried to do due diligence there. Also, when I got the place, it had this, cool siding, whatever. And I thought, like a typical house, you're going to have like your plywood and then your sheathing on the outside. Well, the outside was the inside. It was about a 1/3 of an inch thick. So, my first move was to cut out mold and mildew resistant drywall to fit in every pocket of the studs, then insulate that. And then I built every room as a room within a room. So there's, even though it was all framed out, I left a 2-inch gap, framed out the control room. Then same for the other ones. Then like the ceilings of these rest on the walls of individual rooms. So I should have, there's no way to test it until there's no 50% point where you're like, oh, is this going to work? Is like, no, when I put the last door on, is like, did I do it right?
Right.
So I'm still patiently waiting that day. But I mean, I've been trying to, really follow it to the letter, because just everything that I read is like, look, if you're going to skip one step, then just don't do it at all.
Yeah. Yeah. It's either you go full tilt or you don't do it at all, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, for listeners that are interested in coming up to you and doing some projects, for example, let's say a 4-piece rock band wants to come in. What what should they prepare for when they're coming to your studio?
Well, I wanted to build the place big enough to be able to track it live. If that's, if bands are playing out a lot and they're super tight and that's how they always play it. I wanted to be able to accommodate that, even though, most times in my past it had been kind of the brick by brick method. So the live room is big enough for like a drum set and a guitar player and bass, and I have like an ISO room kind of built in the booth. I mean, I don't want to give you too many hand signals here and
Right.
show you, but essentially I kind of angled off in my last third of the shed. The booth kind of goes to an angle, and then like behind that is where like my electrical boxes, the Cisco switcher for all the Ethernet and all that. So that's also going to double as a ISO room. So that way, like if in the live room I have drums, a guitar player, and his amp, we could always put the bass amp in the ISO, or the guitar amp in the ISO and run the bass DI, and then vocalist in the vocal booth, and everything's, double walls, double doors. So in theory, I should be able to be at full volume in here, drummer bashing out there, and the vocalist will be none the wiser.
Gotcha. Cool. So let's back up even a little bit more. Say a band is starting to think about going to a recording studio. What are some things, some tips you could give a group, an artist, what have you, before they even call a studio? What do you think they should be preparing for?
Well, there's so many different, I guess, ways to approach recording nowadays. It's, I'd say one is like playing to a click, whether that's even just a singer-songwriter or a drummer. That can just be, if you've never played to a click track before, it can be kind of jarring. And like I had a singer-songwriter come in, and he's kind of playing the song, and I just tapped the tempo out. And on like 5 of the 6 songs it worked, but one of them it just didn't. So, then you got to go through and beat detective it. But I just did that as a fail-safe, because I just kind of explained to him, like, if all we want to do is record guitar and vocals, like, that's fine. But if you ever wanted to make these like full productions, it gives us a little leeway there to, put some scratch drums behind it and have a drummer come in, or, I'm capable of programming drums. If you like how they sound, we can ride with that and bring in a bass player. But, yeah, I mean, it can be different playing to a click. It can be different playing in headphones. So, I mean, I would even say, like, if a band's jamming out, try to work some way that, like, even if it's like a little Zoom interface, and then you run some headphones and a splitter off that, just so you're hearing the band in headphones as opposed to live, that it might not sound like a big deal, but it can be, it can be very different and take you out of your comfort zone. So if you come in here or to any studio, like, I can play it to a click, I can play it not to a click, I can play it without headphones, I can play it with headphones. That just kind of allows any method of recording.
Cool. Yeah, that's good advice. Yeah, definitely. Bands that I have had the pleasure of working with as well, is like, sometimes I say, at least practice with a click. And when we get to the studio, and if you feel really confident with your tempos and you don't want to do it with a click, but you've been practicing with it, you guys are going to be able to do it well without it, if you're listening to each other and you're just, locked in. Because sometimes that happens.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Then it's like running with the weights off, it just practice into the click, just tightens them up.
Exactly. Now, what are some other things that you've experienced over the time of being a recording engineer that would help listeners out there that are looking forward to doing, a recording project?
Well, here's maybe something kind of cool. I just like to, if you just feel like you're kind of in a funk, or I'm writing the same song over and over, one thing I found kind of cool is to put on, either a movie they like or maybe a movie they've never seen, and on mute, right? And then just watch a scene and kind of score it, whether it be with just your guitar or whatever, because it'll kind of get you out of your rhythms, maybe. And that can kind of be a good thing to like shake things up and bring out some emotions. And then, sometimes if you feel like you're writing the same song over and over and say you're, writing down tempo kind of melancholy music, is like, well, watch something happy and see what comes out. Or the reverse can be true too, is like, people will be like, well, I can't write sad songs, my life's pretty good. It's like, well, watch a movie that can tear at the heartstrings a little bit, and then you can almost, put yourself in their position, and then then the emotion that's coming through is still authentic, although it might not be yours if you're like feeling for them. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. You get inspired by something that you weren't even thinking about at that moment. It's just like a complete shift. It's like you took a right turn instead of, going left kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Absolutely.
So what about the listeners out there that are interested in becoming a recording engineer? What kind of advice do you have for them?
Well, first of all, you better not like money.
Well, that's almost for every musician out there too.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I'm being a little tongue in cheek.
Yeah,
here,
I know.
I will say too is like, most engineers, I don't want to say are failed musicians, because we're all still working on our albums, right? They just we just drop them every 10 years like Dr. Dre or something. They're just slightly less anticipated.
Right.
But I mean, that's really what drew me to it, is like going to MMI. I wanted to be the all singing, all dancing producer, play every instrument. And I had buddies in class, like when we're in production classes, they'd whip up an instrumental in the class period that be like, I had worked for days on my composition and it doesn't compare to that. And they're like, well, my dad was in the church band and yada blah blah. And then when it came to studio class, it was like, hey, Jordan, my mic isn't working. Hey, Jordan. Hey. So it just, for me, it was kind of a get in where you fit in type of deal.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say like it's still a creative process. And I try to, that's what gives me my creative fulfillment, is mixing and mastering and coming up with ideas and trying wild stuff that may or may not work. But I would say like you have to be down with the nerd aspect of it, because I don't necessarily, my buddies, they think that I'm like an IT guy too, because I got my computer up and going. It's like, no, man, I know this percentage of computers, and that's to keep my Pro Tools running.
Right.
So, but, that being said, is like, I feel like you have to be, open to at least a little bit of electronics. And, and some things more than others. Like, I'm sure some people are far better at computers than me and all that, but like electronics is kind of, it's cool for me to see how stuff works. So I build like a lot of DIY kits and solder up preamps, because, you can buy a Neve pre for $700 to $1,000, or you can get an AML kit for $230. And, so I just mean, maybe like, be ready to embrace the inner nerd, because it'll come in handy with acoustics and, I mean, things that I, didn't even think of, or we didn't even really touch on in school. Sometimes the schooling will give you like the baseline.
Yep.
To be able to understand the YouTubes you need to watch. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It basically, you learn the language in school, and then you go down your own wormholes. And then it's like when you start getting into electronics, acoustics is like, those can be their own discipline. You could just focus on that and stop engineering, and be an electronics repairman or an acoustician. But I just try to stay open to all that and like, don't let it scare me. And I guess, to answer your question instead of just rambling, I just want to, I'd say, be open to things that even, you don't know they exist, or you haven't tried them. So you don't know that, be like, well, I could never understand that. It's like, well, like, trust me, I'm not the brightest crayon in the box, and I still can figure out my electronics and resistors and, so.
Right. Yeah. And, for me, when I was starting out, I was like, schematics was like such a foreign language to me. I was just like, I don't know if I'm ever going to understand any of this. But if you just, just like anything, if you just keep working at it and every failure is a stepping stone to success, so eventually you're going to get it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, for sure. And it's the same with an instrument or whatever,
Yep.
like picking up a guitar for the first time, like you're not going to be shredding in a week.
No.
It's going to get frustrating. And it's funny how sometimes, that stuff will mirror itself. Like with guitar, if you're practicing and it seems like you're getting worse and worse, and then you set it down for a week and you come back to the song and you just lace it, it's like,
Yep.
where did that come from? And it's the same with electronics. It's like you get to a mental block and you screw up a piece that doesn't work, and then you have to go and figure out why it doesn't work, and then something will just click like, oh, and now I've overcame that and I'm ready for the the next challenge,
Exactly. Like the other day, I'm setting up a MIDI keyboard and stuff. I'm like, why? I mean, it's getting signal to the channel, but it's not giving me any audio. Like, what's going on? It's like all of a sudden I went, wait, click this little button, like auto monitoring. Oh, now I'm getting exactly what I'm looking for. It's like, why didn't I think of that right away? It's just sometimes you just get that little mental block. You just overthink something and you just like, oh, you totally missed something. And then all of a sudden you remember something and like, oh, and it all comes back together.
Well, yeah, and it'll never happen again.
Exactly. Exactly.
Like that's in the toolbox now. So.
Yep. Exactly. It's like if someone gives you all the answers, you're not going to learn anything. And then what good is that?
Well, yeah, no, you hit on something right there. Is like, a lot of people will be like, hey, man, can you teach me how to mix? I'm like, sure, I'll teach you how to mix 1,000 songs.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's like that, and I'm, I don't say it in that voice. I'm being sarcastic here, but it's like there's no other way. You could, it's good to read books, and in building this place, I started to feel more like a construction worker than an engineer.
Yeah.
So the whole time I'd be listening to podcasts. I mean, yours included, and Recording Studio Rock Stars and Working Class Audio. And this, that, and the other. And that kind of helped me stay connected to recording. And then, you're listening to those and they're talking about this trick that they did or how they got this, reverb or putting a piezo pickup on an acoustic guitar. And, all that little stuff is like noted. It's just building the vocabulary.
Right. And then you have to go and do it. Otherwise, you might forget all about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So another aspect of being a studio owner is the business side. What are some things about the business side you can tell people that, no matter if they're a musician or looking to become, a studio owner, things that you have learned over the time of doing this that you didn't even think might be something that you needed to know?
Yeah, I mean, just treating it like a business. I guess that I hope this answers the question, but like whether it's a band or a studio, is like we all start doing it because we love it. And then in the initial stages, I mean, we all struggle with like the imposter syndrome and, things like that, or charging, because then a lot of people, like, even if initially I'm working with my friends and then you start to work with strangers, but like you're working on music, you're helping them create something that's very dear to them. Like most of the people I work with end up becoming friends. So then it's like money gets weird. And, with bands, I'm sure it's the same type of deal. I've, haven't professionally been in a band, just my band days ended in high school, but I don't know. I just heard somebody kind of explain it, and I'm sure I'm gonna butcher it. But essentially, they were saying like, if you don't charge enough, or it could, because money always gets weird, and man, money will kill the creativity. If you have that talk, like I always try to have like the money talk first before somebody comes in here, because I hate talking money. Like I hate money. That's why I'm an engineer.
Yeah.
But that can kill the creative vibe. But what I had to kind of overcome is like, somebody was just saying, they're like, look, if you don't charge enough, you're going to be out of this business. So you have to, not saying rake people over the coals, but you have to know your worth, because if you don't charge enough and you're going to be out of business in 3 years, what if somebody was going to come to you in 5 years that was going to make like an album that changed their life or changed other people's lives, or you know what I mean? So it was like kind of helped me overcome the hump of like, well, if I want to be here, being able to provide a service, I have to make sure that, you know, I'm charging more than, you know, more than I initially did. We'll just say
Gotcha.
that, because then things like taxes come in,
Yeah.
and, you know, wear and tear on equipment and tubes, and, you know, it just it all adds up. And that's the same with the band, like, you know, traveling with gear, I'm sure, and then splitting money, I'm sure that can be kind of, you know, a point of contention. So it's just like, you know, it sucks to have to look at it like a business, and sometimes that can take the fun out of it. But like, you know, knowing your worth will make sure that you're able to provide your service for longer.
Gotcha. So did you do like research, like call other studios in your area, see how much they charge, or how did you figure out where your medium or your baseline prices were going to start?
Well, I had when I had my basement studio that I affectionately called the blanket fort, because I just had a bunch of moving blankets around. You know, that was my sound treatment.
Gotcha.
I had a couple panels up and stuff too, but I had, you know, worked with, and I still have a, you know, a good relationship with most of the studios around here. So, you know, I kind of knew what everybody's charging, and I'm, you know, not the most expensive, but I'm not the cheapest either. So you do, I mean, exactly what you said. You kind of you can't price yourself out of the market either.
Right.
So, you know, you got to make sure the phone's still ringing. But yeah, I mean, it's a tough deal to kind of figure out what it's worth. And then in the past couple of years, with prices hiking and everything else, is like, you know, I had to raise prices too. And then, you know, you got to have the conversation with people like, you know, I'm not doing this just because I decided to. Like, if groceries double,
You're right.
then, you know, prices got to go up too. I can't charge my 3 years ago price for a project today either.
Exactly. It's like, is the bubble going to burst eventually? I mean, we can't just keep hiking prices left and right. You know, the back end to the front end is just it's got to explode eventually, like everything else.
Well, yeah, they can't just keep printing more money.
Right, exactly.
I mean, they are, but I hope it stops.
Yeah, because eventually everybody's going to be living in a cardboard box pretty soon if prices keep going up. It's crazy.
No, for sure. I mean, I hope we're out of it, and like in building this place too. You know, the other deal is like, you know, this place costs about a little more than I thought it was gonna.
Yeah.
So prices got to go up, you know, because I've invested in that, and then, you know, but I did try to cut corners and where I could, as in like DIYing the things I was able to. But you know, I have a significant chunk kind of tucked away in here, and I try to have like a couple of choice microphones, and kind of, you know, and I might not be everybody's flavor either, but what I kind of tried to do, and this, you know, a lot of studios up here and the ones that I work with, and, you know, I'm not saying this in like negative connotations, but they kind of have like an up north cabin feel. And like, if that's what somebody calls for and they're looking for, I'll give them numbers of the other studios and be like, hey, you know, go talk to my buddy at this studio, talk to my buddy at this studio, talk to my buddy at this studio, go take a tour, check the vibe out, because that might be more suited to you. I wanted to do something a little more modern, which is kind of, you know, in the name of Halliewood, like the town up here is called Lake Hallie, and I just kind of called it, the first place we lived in it was affectionately known as the Tank Farms, and there's a bit of stigma up there, you know, and so I just said it, you know, I always would tell my friends when they were coming up, like, oh yeah, I moved up to Halliewood now. So then when we moved to this spot, I just, you know, I had a couple of studio names, and people are like, no man, that's you, that's your name. But cool. I, you know, initially it's like the name is kind of to not take myself too serious, but at the same note, you know, I wanted to live up to the name a little bit, and, you know, it looks pretty modern in here, and I'm, you know, on my way to having Atmos, and I want to, you know, stay up on the newest trends, and you know.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about some of the new technologies coming up and how you're working with those. For one of the things I was going to ask you was like things like studio or audio movers, where you can do mixing over the internet with people, or even recording, and then I was going to get over to Atmos and seeing if you were going to go that direction as well.
Yeah, I haven't. I mean, I've done a fair amount of research into the audio movers and Soundflower and things like that, but I never ended up really doing a ton of, the recording with no latency or whatever.
Right.
I don't know. See, I put myself in a bit of a, well, I mean, I was held through the pandemic. A lot of people couldn't, we couldn't leave. We couldn't.
Yeah.
So I had kind of pieced together, I'd call, my rep at Sweetwater and put together a package for people because they'd be like, okay, I need to record. It's like, well, what's your budget? What are you looking at doing? Do you need speakers? Do you just want headphones? Blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So I ended up facilitating getting a bunch of artists around here, home studios. And now it's like, hey, man, forget all that. Come in here now. Time's But so instead of the audio movers route, I had almost, kind of made people, or helped them be able to record at home so I could just do the mixing if we transferred me the stems.
Right.
And now I just kind of, I want to get in on, the ground floor of things and, have more than just like interface preamps and, MXL mics and stuff. And nothing against, I'm not, knocking the brand in total. I just mean like I wanted to have, higher quality. I wanted to have like the treatment in this room. Graham from Music City Acoustics gave me like 4 plans, mild to wild, and the wild plan was the whole back wall is bass trap. So I went with three of 4 on the crazy scale.
Gotcha.
But I got the whole ceiling is clouds. I got bass traps in all 4 corners. There's about 16 panels around the side. So I mean, it's a fine line between dead and tight in here.
Mm-hmm.
And I auditioned. My buddy in town that has Eau Claire Pro Audio, Zach, I found his store on Reverb and he had like some Barefoots. At the time I had some ATC SEM 20s, but I was looking at getting these PMCs.
Yeah.
He had like 3 or 4 sets of like really nice monitors for sale. I'm like, listen, dude, I don't know who you are or how what you're doing with all these monitors, but you let me know when's a good time to buy you a coffee. We need to have a little talk. So he brought his monitors over. I ordered these PMCs with the intention of returning them if my ATCs beat them out. So I was able to audition like 4 or 5 pairs of very nice monitors in my space, which would not be attainable usually. Like I can't go to Vintage King in Nashville or LA and audition them or whatever.
Right.
You go to Guitar Center and it's like they're kind of on like a storage rack in a small glass room. Is like, this isn't my room. They don't even have all the ones I want. And yeah, so I mean, I just tried to get, like bang for my buck as good of a monitoring environment I could get in. And then that kind of led me down the Atmos wormhole, and I have the ceiling firing speakers set up. I'm waiting to get the full array around, but before I jump off that deep end, I gotta finish me live room here. I'm drywalling right now, so
Gotcha.
I mean the light's at the end of the tunnel, but I do plan to have Atmos fully up and running, by spring, summer next year.
Gotcha.
That's something that really, really interests me. I think that's super cool, and I believe in it, even though like the 5.1 didn't take off. I heard a couple people talking about it, and just like we got to listen to quad mixes in school, the Dark Side of the stuff, and it's awesome. But like a lot of people, unless you're an audiophile, you don't even sit in one space and listen.
Right.
I mean, I even find myself doing it with my, my Amazon devices. It's like, hey, play this song, play this podcast, and I'm walking around doing dishes, doing laundry, whatever.
Right.
So what's cool about the Atmos is like the whole object-based thing where like, as we know, if you have a stereo track and you're looking at it in your DAW, unless Logic, I think they only like show one of the tracks. But anyways, a stereo track is just 2 audio tracks linked to each other. The 5.1 mix is 6 of them.
Yep.
5 speakers in your low frequency channel, and there's just 6 waveforms. Is like, this goes through this speaker, this goes through this. So the whole object based thing, that kind of sold me on it, where like, you can, if you have a sound bar that has three, left, right, center, and then like you can add two of the Sonos ones, just drop them behind you. And then as long as you let your interface know, it's like, well, what are we playing this through? One speaker, three speakers, how many ceiling firings, how many surrounds?
Yep.
It's just super cool to me. And, it makes me believe that is the way of the future. And I also, in my time of, trying different things to see what sticks, I've done a couple of short films, and I'm working with a company in town now that puts out a fair amount of shorts. It's like 4 people together, a collective, and I'm gonna be doing all their audio. And so Atmos is like a must when it comes to that too.
Yeah.
So I just figured that opened the doors, and I also just found it cool that, like, people, I mean, in bigger cities where there's a lot more Atmos rooms, people are starting to create with the idea, instead of like, hey, take my 2-track mix and make it Atmos. Like, okay, well, I'll add a longer reverb for the side and a longer reverb for the rear. Atmos.
Right, right.
It's like, if people are creating with the idea that this is going to be immersive, I think that can be like another way for people to express themselves or create cool environments or, experiences for the listener. And I'm all in. I'm sold.
So yeah, we were talking about Atmos now. Yeah, because like you said, Quad was back in like the 70s, and then we had 5.1, which came out I think in like the late 80s, early 90s. I think I'm trying to remember the dates when that started. Kind of.
Yeah, no, that sounds about right.
Yeah, and now we have this Atmos, and for listeners out there, if you're not sure what Atmos is, I think it's up to 9 speakers. I think it's like 2 basses, and then you have ones above you, behind you, and in front of you, if I remember correctly how that's set up.
Yeah. I mean, from my understanding, it can be like up to 128 speakers, because like then Atmos mixes, basically the theaters will use the same file as we would. So
right.
To mix in it, they recommend having at least, because like and I'm saying this for the people who have, no experience or
no prior knowledge.
Like,
yeah,
your 5.1 setup, which like, a couple of my uncles had, a couple of my buddies had in their basement, but nobody really used it for music because, one, a lot of people don't sit still that long, and like listen to an album.
Right.
And 2, you had to buy the SACD or the DVD audio. Yep. So another reason I think Atmos is going to survive is like right now, if you have iTunes or Spotify or Tidal, you can just go in and switch it to Atmos. And if you have like the Apple earbuds, the Pros,
the newest ones,
yeah, then you can turn on immersive audio, and like if you move your head, the mix stays in front of you.
Right.
You know, and that's pretty cool. And just the 5.1 was like, left, center, right, rear, left, rear. 0.1 is your low frequency. So Atmos adds another point. So whatever's after that, the third number is your ceiling firings. So for mixing, they recommend at least 7.1.4. So in addition to the left, center, right, rear, left, you'll also have 2 lateral channels about at your ear, a little bit behind you. Mm-hmm. And you can either have 1 sub or 2, so 0.1 or 0.2. Either, a sub on each side or just the one, and then 0.4. So you have 2 in front of you on the ceiling and 2 behind you on the ceiling. But, you can have 9.2.6 or, 100 whatever the theaters are. I think they have up to 128 speakers is what the theater mix will get. And that's not even a different file, which is the coolest thing to me.
Right, because it just copulates itself down into whatever format you're listening to, from mono to big explosive, like you said, theater type stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And that is what also, the reason I think it's going to survive is you don't have to then go rebuy your music catalog. You just click a button in wherever you listen to music already, and it's like, oh, boom, Atmos mix, cool, done.
Right. Cool, yeah. So the future of technology is going to be an interesting journey over the next, I think, decade to 2 decades. It's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen with all that kind of stuff, because they might even start putting that stuff in your cars and stuff, some kind of Atmos type thing. Who knows?
I think Tesla is maybe either has done it or is, teasing the fact, because I mean, you're already in a surround environment, with the speakers around you. They just initially is like everything on the left plays one thing, everything on the right plays another. But, if they just route it different, then I'm pretty sure the Tesla is going to be, having Atmos compatible. So
it's
they're
crazy.
going to bring the car mix to a whole new level, huh?
Right, exactly.
Check my mix in the car.
Is there anything else we haven't talked about that you think that you'd like to listeners to know about?
Shoot, I feel like I've been just tangenting the whole time. No, man, I think, you covered a bunch of it. Just, I want to encourage artists who like the studio seems daunting, or, a lot of people I reach out to will, somebody in the band records them. And usually that's like the same guy who will do their live sound or something. And I don't know how to just say this without sounding like I'm being a jerk. I'm saying this from a point of like
experience.
Yeah, and like also like for their sake to like realize your music to the highest quality. Like I've had messages with people and they're like, "Well, we went to a studio and it sounded the same as the blah blah blah, when our bass player records it." And it's like, "Well, what studio?" So then I do a little research and it's like, well, if they have like some Perception 2020s and Focusrite Sapphire or Scarlet, and your bass player has a Focusrite, and wouldn't it be weirder if it sounded different?
Right, exactly.
And so I wanted to have an environment that's treated where like the playback here, I'm very happy with how it came out. Like this sounds better than any room to my recollection that we had in school. And there was like some pretty cool setups there. And just that allows you, whether it's in the recording, mixing, or mastering phase, to make decisions with, in certain rooms, or even rooms that I've had set up initially, where I'm recording in a closet for the vocal booth and my speakers are in a corner or one's in a corner. So I'm getting way more bass from that side. Is like, then, you neuter it and take out all the 200, 300 hertz, go play it in the car. And it's like, well, this don't sound right. Like, you just took all the power out of it. That's why you did that with your EQ.
Right.
So, and I'm talking you as in me.
Right.
So I just, I tried to set up a place that, I feel can be like conducive to creativity, and where you're being able to, make accurate decisions during all phases of it. I feel like it's, just like building this place, like it's the little things that count. And when they stack up on each other, like being able to hear like the separation and depth. And I had a lot of trouble before this room, like getting reverb to sound right, too little, too much. And I think I cracked the egg here when I would go to add reverb before, you're putting on a fake reverb onto a sound that was probably recorded in a room that wasn't treated. So that sound has a lot of reverb. Then I'm adding a fake reverb in my speakers, pumping that out into my drywall room, which is then exciting the room.
Yep.
So you're hearing like 3 reverbs, only one of them is there. Where, this here, having it so tight in here is like, I'm confident in adding spatial effects and things like that, that is like, this is going to translate. And, I just, even though the live room isn't done, I've been having a lot of bands in to just come check the place out, listen to some tunes. And it makes me feel good when people are like, I've listened to this song for 15 years. I never heard that organ part on that third chorus. It's like, I'm like, oh, that's awesome. I love that, because when that happens to me, I'm like, I get goosebumps and stuff. And so I've just been trying to have people come in here and kind of get the vibe. And, it might not be for everybody. And like I said, I have good relationships with all the other area studios. I either worked with them still work with them, still conversate with them. Like, try to help each other out and be in not the scarcity mindset, be in the blue sea, not the red one.
Right. Exactly. Where can people find you out in the interweb areas?
Well, Halliewood.com is the website, and then like the Instagram and Facebook are Hayley Wood Recording Company. So I know that can be a mouthful, but yeah, HALLIEWOOD, like Hollywood, but Halliewood, and then Recording Company.
Gotcha. And I'll put that all in the show details as well. So, Jordan, thank you so much for being on the Wisconsin Music Podcast. It was a lot of information, positive and great learning things and tips and all that other great stuff coming from you. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, man, I appreciate you having me, and I appreciate what you're doing for the community as far as engineers, venues, artists. It's super cool, and I appreciate your time and all the time you put in after hours as well to make this happen, man. I know it's not easy.
Thanks. Thank you so much. Well, thanks again for tuning in to another episode of the Wisconsin Music Podcast. Once again, I'm Zach Fell, your host and creator of the Wisconsin Music Podcast, where I love to amplify the great sounds coming out of the Wisconsin state. We have great talent here, great support, great listeners. Thanks to Fox Cities Indie Radio for syndicating this on Wednesdays and Sundays, along with their other great programming. So make sure you check out the Fox Cities Indie Radio. And thanks to this week's guest, Jordan Hoversholm of Hayley Wood Recording Studios, for being on this week's episode. If you'd like to be on the show, just go to wisconsinmusicpodcast.com, fill out the guest request form up at the top, ask for your email and your name, and then I'll send you an auto email asking you for more information. If you are enjoying these episodes, please consider donating to the Wisconsin Music Podcast. Donations help pay for the website and putting the podcast up on streaming services, and also getting our name out there to all Wisconsinites and others that are interested in our great music here in Wisconsin. Donations are secure through PayPal and Stripe. All you have to do is go to the website and click on Donate to WMP. Once again, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.